really communities and rural communities setting up their seeds and exchanging them, and every household would have this pretty much the same diverse food basket, I would say, at the rural. But today, the situation is different. So after training, and then I started working straight from college, started working with the smallholder farmer associations. And then I find, no, actually the situation is very real. These commodities, these food that I was introduced to and I grew to love, you no longer find them. And what amazes me now is that my grandmother used the same food production system as well as the marketing system at the time that was working to educate my mother and send me to school. And I don't think most of the rural farmers, women farmers today, the small-scale farmers, are able to do the same. So when we think like that, then you really look at the impact that this thing, the corporate world has had on the very livelihoods that the farmers really depend on. Because it has not just attacked their source of production, but also in general, their abilities to even have better lives in their own definitions, and even get access, basic access to healthcare, to education, to other social amenities. So you see, it's an entire holistic and linked impact that the corporate world has had on small-scale farming, or in general in small on the farming communities. So when I reflect in that perspective to say, this is what I saw when growing up, and it's no longer there. What went wrong? Where have we lost it, or who has failed who in the process? So you find there is corporate control on the means of production, that's the seeds, the land, and everything else, and then it controls all the way to how things are marketed, what defines the standards of what should come to the market, because if your banana is this size, then it's not fit to come in the market. It has to be of a particular size. If it is just maybe bended this way, then you can't take it on the market. So we are operating on the corporate world terms. That's what the farmers are exposed to, and because of the standards are developed on the other side, then you find that what they have is inferior, and then it gets to die down. And then they go on to control the political system that then eventually develop even the rules of engagement on the means of production, how you access and control land, then the means of how you access inputs, and then who is controlling the inputs, and in this case your seeds, your fertilizers, and then also you control how it is marketed and on whose stage. So it's a very unfortunate situation where left, right, center, turn, you find there's a corporate power somewhere that is controlling how farming is in this place. So you find one, the production system has been overtaken by the corporate world. So in this case, even though the farmers would want to preserve their own seeds and exchange, because there is then a need for income, for basic amenities, and to send the children. Then the marketing system, they no longer recognize this as what things need to be marketed, because the consumer has now been corrupted. So you find most of the generation that is growing, what they know as to be on their food is not the millet that we see here. What they know is something else. You need to find pasta, and our farmers are not growing the wheat and everything else. You need to find chicken, and that chicken has to be boneless. And then for them you need fish, and they've never seen even that the fish it has bones. And they've never seen scales, and they would even wonder whether this is the head of a fish or a shark. So they will not make that distinction. So it's pretty much, you find that it's a very controlling from the root cause. When we talk about poverty, you always have the discussion as what are the root causes, and then find where the root is. That's where there's corporate capture. and it's captured that, then it's also captured our political system to develop policies, to develop even investment plans, and even capture what they say it's the research agenda. To say that if these ones are our varieties that the local farmers would want to preserve, and then you find that no, you need to address the food insecurity question. And the way you address it by having high yielding varieties, then they attach your research institutions, because that's where they say they are breeding high yielding varieties, disease resistant, and then they say it's disease resistant, but it comes with a chemical. Then you wonder, if this is a disease resistant variety that you want to expose to the farmers, then why do they still have to have pesticides? So you find that it's a whole system that has been manipulated, and unfortunately our political systems it has been bought into the whole agenda. So yes, we celebrated independence 1964, 65, 66. This has Southern Rhodesia, but now we have another form of colonization in as far as our food system is concerned. And unfortunately, our political powers are not paying attention to it. They even develop global agriculture development agenda based on their terms, not on our terms as family, as African, and preserving our own agriculture on the terms of our own farmers, because that's what they are used to. So you find now there's all these challenges to say, like for example, now we have the land question. For over a decade in Malawi, we've been discussing the issue of land tenure security and how they need to have more access for land and control over land, and then the land gets repealed. You have a progressive land policy since last year that indeed, of course, it offers more security, because now you can register and have a title to your land. But this is one of the conditions that the GH New Alliance has put in place, that we should make land reforms, pave way for large-scale investments. Where is the room for family farmers, even in this case? So on one hand, of course, you celebrate progressive policies that recognize the role of women, that recognize access and control on production resources. But on the other hand, when you link 1+1, then you find that it's actually just paving way for certain agenda that is coming via the back door. And unfortunately, nobody's at the back door looking at who is entering. So these are some of the challenges that we see as really destroying the food system and impacting negatively on the very livelihoods and that just sovereignty. We would like to look at it from a rights perspective, and then you say, where are the rights? The duty bearers, how come they are not really protecting the rights of producers in this case? In whose terms are they doing it? But when you're over 60% of the national budget is coming from elsewhere, then you are very sure to know that you have very little control on how and you determine what that money it needs to be used for. Not that we don't have our own money that we can invest in our own terms, but I guess it's a whole issue then you link to the corruption and the different agendas on those that we have even put in power. So that's really the challenge that we've seen. For example, the corporate world, for example, your Monsanto and Citgo, they were so much focusing developing thousands of varieties on maize. And then up until people moved on. Meanwhile, farmers were still going on to producing their groundnuts, the varieties that they were used to. And that's where they see that the farm input subsidies, now people are starting to question, okay, maize is not nutritious, we need to nourish it. Then they go and control the groundnut seed systems as well. And then you say, okay, now the varieties that the farmers are used to, they say, no, the market doesn't want this small size because it has to be used for oil production, or you have to have groundnut oil and the like. So it has to be this size. And then your increase that has developed that variety that needs to come on your farm input subsidy and then distributed to farmers, and then you find it's a whole vicious circle. So that's how they really control some of the things that we thought are at least preserved and indigenous in this case. And they are going to cowpeas, they're also going to pigeon peas, at least the crops that we thought maybe these ones farmers would want to preserve and to have their own village community seed savings and exchange among themselves. But that's where they see the potential, the market potential, and the processing and value addition potential that is there. So it's not one, it's very interlinked, and unfortunately there's very limited transparency into it. And because you really, when you come to the table to dialogue, they talk in terms that we don't sometimes understand. They'll bring in economic terms, they'll bring in globalization, you can no longer close the borders. But they started to close the borders when they divided the southern nation. They say now you are Zimbabwe, now you are Zambia, now you are Malawi. So why are they globalizing now? Because they already closed in actual fact. So this whole thing, I don't know. Meanwhile, we've been discussing, and our regional economic bodies are also not helping us. They seem to be very silent on this. Maybe there's also a capture at that level. So SADC is pushing this seed harmonization agenda, and it comes to the nationals. Everyone has to align to the regional policies. We have to domesticate them on the terms that have been defined elsewhere. So the challenge now has been that one, the farming farmers, the small-scale farmers, or whatever we want to call them, but the bottom line is that the ones that are producing, but they don't have the means to produce. One, it's they cannot access credit, which they need the cash income. Two, they are delineated for the market, both input and output market. They cannot participate effectively, especially if they have their own indigenous seeds. They need to participate in this regime for them to at least have a share or a part in the corporate system. They cannot determine even the price, because the price, they would say, the global markets are falling down. Therefore, your price for your commodity is this much. Then there is no bargaining at all. They cannot even set the prices, because they would say, we gave you the seed, it has to be like this, and this is the price they would get, and then they will take it and off it goes. And because even the consumers, which are the populations even at a national level, they have now a different taste.